Hey friends, you're tuned in to the Learn or Be Learned podcast, a show where wisdom meets curiosity in order to discover the human experience. I'm your host, Shiva D, and remember, you either learn from or you're learned from. Now, let's get back to the show. All right, welcome back everybody to another great episode. Today's guest is Brandon Davis. He is an entrepreneur, young spirit. He's done incredible things at a young age, and that's really what he wants to talk about here is the paradigms of that. So, Brandon, thank you so much for being here. I'm excited to have this conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much. You've created a very unique platform to host individuals and as well as do solo episodes. If you can let me rant for 2 seconds before we jump into
Yeah,
everything.
go for it.
If everyone hasn't listened to this episode, you just produced one. I don't know when this episode's going to be coming out, but you did an episode on the power of learning and how different people learn different ways. And as I was sitting there listening to that episode, I could not agree with it more because there's so many different unique ways that people learn inside of our lives, whether it's audio or I forget the exact terms you use, but like the hands-on, touchy-feely sort of stuff. And I realized I never even recognized that inside of my own life. And so, as we're going to be talking about some of the entrepreneurial journey I've had at a young age, I feel like I could tie a lot of those lessons back to that episode you made. So, I guess my plug for you is everyone go listen to that episode because I'm going to be drawing on some things that I learned.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that so much. And I'm excited to jump into that, but I think it would help the audience a little bit if they knew your backstory and where you are today and how you got there. So you mind sharing a little bit about the past?
Yeah, absolutely. So, to be quite candid with everybody, I'm still pretty young. I'm 23 years old. And I just have a huge love for business. Anything entrepreneurial, it's right up my alley. So, when I first started going to college, I was in the typical lectures, and this is why I resonated with that episode so much. I go to my typical lectures, and the professor would sit us down for an hour and a half, and they would show the screen, and it would be a PowerPoint presentation, and I'd sit there and take notes on it, not really sure what I was supposed to be taking notes on. And then I'd get to the testing center when test time came around, and there would be things that I resonated with, but didn't fully understand the concepts, or things that just went totally over my head. And these could be topics I was even interested in, like accounting
Right.
or marketing. It's just that style of teaching never resonated with me. Sitting in a classroom with 300 other students just trying to learn from a PowerPoint just confused the heck out of me. And for some people, I have a very good friend who sits down.
Right.
I would go to the library with him and I would ask him, hey, can you tutor me? Can you help me? We take these same classes and these concepts would stick with him. And to me, they were foreign. I just didn't understand that connection. And so at my very freshman year of college, I recognized, okay, I need to start doing something a little bit different because I'm not really getting anything out of this. So I started participating in some clubs around campus that were more entrepreneurial minded. It was less sit down and let's lecture you and more hands on, hey, go try this out and see if it works. So when I started joining some of these clubs, I recognized there was an entire group on campus that was just like me, who didn't necessarily like sitting down for the lectures, but they liked creating something. They liked working on something new. They liked solving problems in a real world scenario. And so that's what I started doing. And ever since then,
Mhm.
I've just fallen in love with business and everything that comes with it.
Mhm. And what business did you create from there? Where did you go?
Yeah, so a few things. Really backstory. My first official business that I ever registered, I grew up in Southern California. And so my first official business in the state of California, it was a landscaping business. I had an old beat up pickup truck and I had a buddy who had some
Mhm.
lawn care equipment. And I'd been cutting my family's grass and my grandparents' grass for years. He'd been cutting his neighbor's grass. And so he said, if we could do this for free for these guys, I think we could go get people to pay us for this. So with our very naive minds, we
Mhm.
went around our small city in Southern California and we knocked on people's doors and we pitched them our services. Probably the worst sales pitch you'll ever hear in your life. We way undercharged our services. People were probably doing it just out of the goodness of their heart, seeing it was two high school students. And overall, it's
Right.
not like we made a ton of money with it or anything, but the lessons we learned from it were incredible. I learned that working for my own dollar was just absolutely amazing. It was a feeling I'd never felt before. At the same time, I was working, doing my own job of the landscaping. I was also doing lifeguarding. So whenever I didn't have lifeguarding shifts, I would go and I'd cut people's grass. And I would just be so ashamed. I'd work for 2 weeks. I'd get my paycheck from the state of California, and half of it would be taken out in taxes, and I'd walk away with hardly anything. And then obviously there's still stuff that we had to do with our
Hmm.
business, but got a lot more to take home, and we could charge what we wanted to charge. So, anyways, I share that story as kind of an accelerator to explain when I got into college and I tried the normal route. I recalled back to that experience I had. I said, okay, I want to start doing something different. So since going to college, I've had a few businesses. Most of them completely sucked and they failed, but I've learned a lot from them. If anyone who's watching the podcast today, if you have anybody who watches on
Right.
YouTube or Spotify or anything, I got this hat right here. It says Coda. For whatever reason, my cousin, myself, and one other guy, we thought starting
Yeah.
an outdoor clothing brand was going to be the next big thing. And so we started designing some clothes and hats and gear and whatnot. And I think we had less than like 70 sales in total, which was just an absolute joke. And lo and behold, a couple guys who know nothing about fashion, it didn't work out for us. So that was one failed idea, but I learned so much about the marketing side and the sales side. So I took that into my next venture, my next venture, my next venture, up until today. And we could talk about this a lot more in detail, but I'm currently working on a tech startup called Interval.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah. That's part of the business journey. I think, having a few failed attempts because, man, you'd have to be incredibly blessed to have a home run on the first go. Um, or, a good enough life experience. I think that's another caveat to add here is if you're younger, you probably will be dancing with some failures because that is the experience that you have yet to gain, right? I think there's so many ways to approach business. But let's say you worked in it somewhere for 20 years, you know the industry really well, you know the problems, then you have a probably much stronger sense of creating a
Mm-hmm.
strong foundational business versus you're 18, 19, 20, you're just trying things along, it's trial and error really. It's just try this, didn't work, why, okay, next one, and then you kind of just keep going from there is what I've noticed because I've had a couple failed attempts, very, very much so. So I totally get that.
Yeah. I feel like when you're younger, you definitely have to get in and get the reps and recognize that failure is just going to be a part of the process. The average age for an
Yeah.
entrepreneur who is successful, it's 40 years old. So it's somebody who's been in their career for the past 15, 20 years, give or take. They know their industry. They know exactly what those problems are, like you were mentioning, and they can go out and solve them. And that is absolutely amazing.
Hmm.
It's just not necessarily the path I wanted to take as I'm younger. And so for everyone who does that, the statistics are there. I mean, they're more likely to succeed if they're starting a business when they're later on in life because they know that industry very
Hmm.
well. But the caveat to that is if you start it when you're young and you're not afraid to fail, you just get in and you put in those reps just like you would at the gym. You push till failure. You can learn so much from those experiences a lot quicker than having just sit down and do what your manager says for the past 15 years and you just kind of check off the boxes. If you actually get in there and you put in the reps yourself and recognize, okay, this tactic I just tried last week is not working, we're going to try something completely different. If you can learn that for yourself, that outcome is going to have a huge dividend inside of your life, whether that be business, family, spiritual. These principles all connect together.
Yeah. So let's start there. Let's jump in a little bit. Why exactly was that part of your spirit that you may have noticed, right? I get this all the time. You're young, you got time. Why are you trying to rush? What's the rush? Is what I'll hear. Um, Especially when you're young and you want to try things. That's just from my personal understanding, analyzing myself is it's like it's just who I am, right? It's a part of my spirit that I just if I were to ignore, it would be ignoring myself, which would make me feel, unfulfilled in life. But, what's your reason why now? What? what do you say to someone that says like, well, you're so young, you have time. Why not just go get a steady job for now and do it later?
No, that's a very good point. And I think that route definitely works for certain people. I'm kind of like you where I feel it inside of me a lot more and where I'd be kind of let down if I didn't go and try something for myself. If I
Hmm.
didn't have anything fun I was working on, like if I was still just trying to do clothing, which I know nothing about the industry, of course I'd go figure something out. But what excites me is the unknown every day. And I know this isn't very usual for a lot of people. They like the steady,
Hmm.
like, I'm going to show up to work. My manager's going to tell me everything I need to get done this week. I'll have deadlines. So I have a certain timeline of when I need everything done. And to me, I like showing up to work every day, sitting down at my computer and saying, okay, this is what I worked on yesterday. If it worked, I'm going to continue doing that. If it failed, I got to figure out a different way to make it work. And so sitting down and trying to find something new every single day is
Hmm.
just so exciting to me, and it keeps life interesting. And I feel like this is why so many people, obviously I haven't been there yet, but I've witnessed my own family members go through that, what everyone calls that midlife crisis. I feel like that's because they do the same mundane thing
Hmm.
over and over and over and over and over and over for years and years and years. And there's no change, there's no excitement. They're doing the same thing that they know how. And, and I think this connects to your podcast so greatly as well, because as humans, we're made to evolve and become better and learn from our mistakes or learn from our failures or learn from our successes and grow off of those. And so if you're a human who's sitting back and doing the same thing every single day with no changes inside of your life, you're not going to be able to evolve into a better version of yourself. And then as humanity as a whole, we're not going to be able to evolve as a better species. And so I think there has to be certain people out there who sit back and say, you know what, I'm not going to go the traditional way, even if I am young and people are telling me it might not be the smartest move. But in order to evolve for myself, I'm going to do this.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I'd say it's even, yeah, the unknown is exciting, but also for me, it would have to be, what's enticing to me is this sense of freedom. Um, I don't mind working all day. I mind working when I want to and how I want to, right? It's more so just the freedom of getting to do what I want, which is why like the best case scenario for me in a 9 to 5 is like a remote job, because I can still kind of have a little bit of autonomy of what I want, but ultimately like my spirit still goes towards entrepreneurship. And just the way my mindset works, I think it just parallels with the people who do business a lot. That being said, I think one of the hardest parts about entrepreneurship is mindset, right? Getting started. And I think that gets harder and harder as you get older, because society pushes paradigms on you and limiting beliefs of themselves onto you, which makes it hard for you to break that and actually go, right? It's like, I actually really wanted to say, when this episode is released, what's cool is the previous guest, so the guest episode right before this one, we ended on the note of limiting beliefs. So I think that's cool that in this episode we kind of continue off of that, because it's so important. Because and in that episode I mentioned there's a, that metaphor quote about how when a rocket needs to get off the ground, 80% of the fuel is burned just to get off the ground, and then momentum kind of carries it forward. It's kind of like the same thing with entrepreneurship, right? It's like 80% is the mindset and actually jumping and getting started and falling and learning. And then, and then once you get that momentum, then it's like, okay, you're making money, you're getting it, right? So, let's go there about self-limiting beliefs. Did you have any when you started? How did you break it? How did you find them?
Oh, absolutely. It is so interesting of a concept because what you said is true. Everything inside of being a young entrepreneur is your mindset. Everything. Because where you lack in that 20-year experience you might have had in the industry, you need to make up for in your confidence and your trust and belief in yourself, your work ethic, and what you're actually capable of doing. So if you have the beliefs inside of your head that you don't know anything, you're too young, you aren't making anything that anybody actually wants, you can't sell whatever product you're creating or service, You don't know how to distribute it. The list goes on and on for anybody who's worked on a business before. But if you tell yourself the I can'ts, the I won'ts, I don't know how's 24/7, and granted, there's going to be times that happens. There's going to be things you just don't know and you need expert opinions for. You need to figure it out. You're going to fail a million times and you're going to get there. But if you use that framework inside of your mind 24/7 as the I can'ts, I won'ts, I don't know how's, that is going to destroy your business. Not because you weren't able to get sales, not because nobody didn't like what you were making. It's because you didn't have the confidence in yourself. And so I look back at some of these failed ventures I've talked to you about. I keep mentioning this Coda one just because I'm wearing the hat today. And at the time, my cousin and our other business partner and myself, we knew nothing about apparel. And we could have sat aside and we said, okay, we could have taken more design classes. We could have put in more time of researching other companies that were in kind of our same industry and grown from there. At the end of the day, it wasn't something any of us were super passionate about. So it kind of edged off. But if we wanted to continue it and actually grow it into something, we didn't put in the amount of work inside of our lives to make sure it could grow. And so I learned that lesson and I propelled it for the business I'm working on currently and the 3 others I've tried in between. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is there's going to be so many people telling you that it's not possible. Not all of them are going to be saying that just because they don't believe in you. Heck, most of the time it's going to be friends or family who are just scared for you and they want the best for you. And so they don't want you to go through this failure. Because as humans, we don't like failure. It's a scary thing. But if you can embrace the failure and not necessarily listen to I don't like calling them haters because most of the time they love you and they just want the best for you. But if you could put aside what they believe and listen to what you know is true and what you know you can actually get done, that's going to be the difference in your business, whether it succeeds or fails. And that's exactly what we've noticed when I'm working on Interval now. Every single day when we show up to the office, if we come in with an attitude of saying, I don't know how we're going to do X, Y, or Z, it takes a whole lot longer for that to get done. But if we come in with the attitude, me and my business partner, of saying, okay, this is what we need to get done and we're going to test X, Y, or Z, there's just something inside of our heads that makes us more enthralled to work that day, that gets us into the trenches, and time just ticks by so much faster. There's days when we're afraid to start a project, when we're afraid to see how it's going to work, when we're afraid to onboard a new customer. Those days, it seems like time is moving so slow. It's one tick the clock at a time. But then, for example, a day like yesterday, we had a lot to get done. We were in our zone. We were excited about what we were working on. We look up the clock at one point and it's already 6:30, and we're like, "Oops, our wives are going to be mad at us tonight. We got to get home." And those days, those are the ones that fire us up. Those are the ones that make us excited. And it's just
Yeah.
because we told ourselves inside of our head, we're going to get it done today.
hmm I see often there's two types of people when it comes to sharing your dreams and goals and such, right? You have the people closest to you that want what's best for you, but may not necessarily know what that is, right? So they'll be worried and they'll tell you not to do it, but not because they don't want you to succeed or they don't want to see you happy. It's just that out of fear, they want you to take whatever the safest route is because they care, right? And then there's the other side where you have people that are a mirror reflection of themselves, right? They don't think they can do it, so they tell you that you can't do it, right? So you say, I want to build a 7-figure business, and then they'll say, oh, well, I couldn't do that. I mean, how could you do that, right? So it's almost like a mirror reflection that they're imposing on you because that's how they think. So I think that's pretty interesting. But what do you do on the days, right? Because I've had conversations with friends before, and I'll tell them, it's not about what you do on the good days. It's about what you do on the bad days. Because my good day, I can work 10 hours. Your good day, you can work 10 hours. That's pretty equal. But when I have a bad day, if I work 1 hour and you work 0, that's where the wins start to stack up, the compound growth, right? Is regardless of the day, you're still getting something done and you're inching forward versus someone who has 3 bad days in a row. They got 0 hours of work done for 3 days versus someone who just did a little bit now has 3 or 4 more extra hours of work done. So where I'm trying to get at is, what do you do on the bad days that propel you forward regardless, right? Especially, let's say, limiting belief wise, or just some thought process that you're just like, you know how it is. You have ups and downs, and especially entrepreneurship. Hell, even in the podcast, I've experienced ups and downs over the years for sure. It's like, what am I doing?
No, definitely. And if anyone ever tells anyone who's listening out there, if anyone ever tells you that they are 100% motivated 24/7, they'd never have a down day, they never have an off day, they're straight up lying to you. That's a false reality.
Yeah,
Um, I consider
yeah,
myself a strong
they're on
optimist. If you
vacation.
haven't got, yeah, yeah, exactly. I consider myself a strong optimist. If you haven't got that from listening to my story so far, I'm a big believer in myself and the world around me. All my brothers and sisters here on this earth, I believe in them. Sometimes that's very naive. And so it can almost be to my downfall at certain points. Something goes wrong in a day and I wake up the next morning just feeling salty at
Mm.
the earth. I feel angry at people. I feel like I'm not doing what I should be for myself or my business or whatever it might be. Those days are hard to get out of bed. That's the reality of every human, whether you're working on your own business, you're working for somebody else. Those days are tough. And so, what I always have to remind myself on the days that are tough is if I could just start doing the little things and create that momentum, like you talked about, where everything starts from just getting going. If you could create momentum inside of your day, things will just start to work themselves out naturally. And it's very hard. Some days you're going to want to just sit in bed and
Yeah.
you're not going to want to do anything. Some days you're going to get to work and you're going to open up your laptop and you're going to want to do nothing. You're going to move your mouse around so it looks like you're working and you're going to get nothing done. Those days are going to destroy you. If you sit back and you just let that day take a hold of you, whatever reason why you woke up grumpy or angry at the world, if you let that control and own your entire day, it's going to propel you into the next day to do the exact same thing. And it's going to have that negative chain reaction. But on the contrary, if you could wake up those days when you really don't want to get out of bed, when you really don't want to go hit the workout, when you really don't want to go work on your business, when you really don't want to go have that tough conversation, if you could start with the baby steps that day and just slowly create the momentum, slowly but surely, by the end of the day, you're going to have at least something to look back and say, okay, I accomplished that. Granted, it might not be the same effort as you put into a normal day when you're super excited about your life and where everything's headed. You probably won't get as much done. And that's the reality of it. But if you could just create that momentum and get a little bit done, and when your head hits the pillow at night and you could tell yourself, I was able to get that done despite what I was going through in the morning. I promise you the next day you're going to be having another one of those good ones and you're going to be able to get more and more done.
Absolutely. I actually think it's more powerful if you were to even just get 1 hour of work done every single day versus 8 hours once a week. You know what I mean? I think there's something strong about consistency that develops in your mind, the discipline as well. Um, you know, people see this shiny object syndrome or the results, but they don't see what's behind the curtains oftentimes, right? So, for example, even with my podcast going on over 3.5 years now, there was days I was working at 8:30 at night on a Friday, or when I was in India taking podcast meetings at like 2 in the morning because the time zone difference. There's those days when you're just like, man, this is tiring. But and I think the best way to say it is those are the days that define you, because if it wasn't for those days that I worked, I wouldn't be at the position where I can now have a small team and keep growing this and have this many episodes, right? And almost, and I love the way Alex Hermosi says this. He says, confidence develops when you create a stack of undeniable proof. So when you have all these results that you look back at and you're like, I did this, I did that, you have no choice but to be confident. I mean, how could you not? You have this whole stack of success. So just like that, I think consistency builds that or aids in it. What do you think?
Oh, 100% it does. Because, and that's hard at the very beginning too. This entire episode has been focused on business. So to kind of continue with that theme, when you're just getting started on something, you don't necessarily have all those wins to look back on that builds your confidence. So what you need to do is relate those to other events inside of your
Yeah.
life to give you reason and purpose on why you're starting the business to begin with. So if you look back so a little bit about Interval, what I'm working on currently, what I've been working on for the past year, it's an AI receptionist for automotive repair shops. So our entire concept is when the mechanics and the service
Mm.
technicians or other staff members at these shops, when they're unable to answer the phone, they miss out on customers and revenue for their business. So when they miss out on the phone calls after a couple rings, if they don't pick it up, our software answers the phone for them and schedules appointments, answers questions for the customers, etc. When we started working on this, it was a pretty new field for me and my partner. We knew stuff about the space, but we weren't like I've never worked personally in an auto repair shop. I'm not a huge car guy. And so that experience we were talking about at the beginning of the episode, where I didn't have 20 years in the industry, I didn't have a lot of confidence going into it. I knew we had a killer product that we were making. I knew we could sell it, but there wasn't much behind it to give me a lot of support. So what I needed to do when I first started working on it, I needed
Right.
to call out or channel other things inside of my life that I was able to do before the business that was going to help me inside of the business. Since I didn't have any wins in the beginning of the business, I need to call on these channels outside of the business. So for instance, I have a lot of experience in the sales industry. I had worked in sales for quite a few years in my life. I'd done hundreds of thousands of dollars of revenue for various companies. So I said, okay, if I could call upon that opportunity I had to do sales at one point, if I could use that to propel me forward for the business, that's what I got to use to start creating that momentum. Or for my business partner, he's the more technical guy, and so there's a lot of pieces and intricacies behind our code that is very confusing, and he's had to teach himself a lot throughout this entire process. And maybe at first he didn't know a lot of the things he was working on, but he went back and he recalled other projects he'd worked on in the past and said, if I was able to work on that, I could do something very similar for this. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is sometimes there's not a clear win right off the get-go. There's not some clear thing you can kind of resonate all your power and your motivation towards. But if you can call upon other things inside of your life to give you that power or that motivation or that effort you want to put forth, call upon that, because that's what's going to start the momentum day after day, at least at the early stages.
Hmm. That's beautifully said, because that's what I had to do with when starting the podcast, right? I had no experience in this. There was the thoughts, they just come up, right? It's, who am I to start just sharing ideas with people? When I started the show, I was about, I guess I was 20, just turned 22, like literally just turned 22. So it was weird, right? Because it's like, well, I'm so young. Like, what do I have to share? Even though I've had people tell me that, I've been pretty good at sharing advice and things like that. It was still this haunting thought of, who am I to just jump in? And what I had to do was reach back, just like you said, reach back to stacks of undeniable proof in different areas of my life that I could use to fuel this area of my life, because that was the only way that was going to get me through it. Uh, because, like you said, there's no foundation for you to just jump in when you're young or when you're new in an industry, regardless of age. So, either or, you kind of have to borrow some confidence from a different field. And it's like, okay, I can do this. But that being said, you also really have to know, is this what you want to do, right? Because just because you're been playing basketball for 15 years and you're really good, you're a pro, doesn't mean you can switch to baseball immediately and be amazing in baseball too, right? So it's, you also have to have that burning desire in the field that you want for that confidence to develop. At least that's what I think.
Yeah, definitely. We know that story from Michael Jordan, Tim Tebow, and everyone in it.
Mhm. Right. Yeah, you see a lot of people in sports kind of just jump to different sport. They're like, actually, this was a little harder than I thought. Um, but you know, on the topic of being young, you got married at what, 2021?
Yep.
21 years? Wow. I mean, that's, in today's generation, that's just not as common anymore, right? So what was that like? How was that? How did that happen?
Yeah, definitely. My Okay, this is the main cliche of the entire episode, but you know that old saying, if you know, you know. Well, we knew. And so my wife and I, we've been dating for quite a while, and we recognize we're Christians, and so there's certain things that came along with our relationship, just being Christians, that different practices that we lived. And so a lot of it comes down to we believe that everyone at some point should be married, and that's kind of how you start a family, with both inside this worldly aspect, but also with God. And so I recognize that's also a very interesting thing to do while we're so young. But at the end of the day, we knew we wanted to start our family together, and so same principle I use in business. Why are we going to wait? I'm not going to wait for somebody else to go and do it. I'm going to go do it myself. And so I proposed to my wife, and we got married. She was 20, I was 21 at the time. So we've been married a little over a year now. Um, and since then, I have not regretted that decision once. And you hear so many people, especially a lot of times when you get married young, there's sometimes regret that comes with that. And I have not felt that 1 ounce. And it's because every single night when I get home from work, I have somebody who
Mhm.
I can go home to and relay my entire day's worth. I could tell them everything that went good, everything that went bad. And I have somebody there who's listening to me and who's able to help me on those tough mornings I already talked about, when it's tough to get out of bed. When I see my wife spring out of bed and she's ready to go get to work, when she's ready to go hit our workout or go to her job or whatever, like, that enthralls me, and she motivates me every single day. On those tough days when I feel like I'm not getting
Mhm.
anything done, I look back and I sit back at my desk and I say, you know what? I have to do this so I can create the life that my wife and I want for us and our future children. I have to do that. So ever since being married, there's a different sense of motivation I have inside of my life.
Yeah.
It's no longer just focusing on, I'm going to create this so I could be amazing, or I can have all the money, or I can have all this, whatever you want to call it. That was a very prideful look inside of my life when I was doing it for me. Now I'm doing it for a greater purpose, for our future family, for the opportunity to be, my ultimate goal is to be my kid's baseball coach. And so I'm putting in all this time and effort right now so I could be my kid's baseball coach in the future. So there's just certain motivational points you hit inside of your life, and getting married is one of them.
Absolutely. I think, and Patrick David says it much better than I could about the idea of marriage and what it brings, the values it brings in your life. That being said, I also think just because marriage is incredibly powerful, I don't think someone should jump into it, right, without being ready within themselves, but also ready for the commitment that they're about to make. That being said, like you said, if you know, you know, 100%. I think if you, it's interesting, right? There's a lot of different stories out there of people's human experiences. And I think some people get married really young, some people get married really, not really old, but older, different
Mm-hmm.
time periods of their life. And it's just interesting because I think the best way we can say it is, as long as you, I guess, if you're a spiritual person or a spiritual being, you just believe that it'll happen when it happens, right? The best time for you, right? Not to compare yourself to somebody else's story. Um, like for example, I'm 25, so and I'm not married, right? But I'm not opposed to it. I just realized there were certain things within me that I needed to be prepared for before making a commitment like that. Um, Same for maybe somebody else, right? They might have um, some things to resolve. Maybe they have some life changes that they're making. Maybe they're moving. Maybe they just got a new job, right? So it's like everybody's story is playing out so differently. What advice do you think you would say for people that, maybe they're older than you? Like, well, I'm not married. Um, what advice do you have for that?
Yeah, absolutely. I have plenty of family members I have aunts and uncles who are double my age and they still aren't married. And so I think it's an interesting caveat we
Mm-hmm.
have, an interesting balance. Because part of me wants to just tell people, I'm like, okay, especially if they're spiritual, say, okay, ask God. and God will give you your answer. That's, I mean, at the end of the day, that's what my wife and I did. We prayed about it
Mm-hmm.
for months, and we said, all right, is this something we should do right now? And we got the confirmation. And so, as weird as that may sound to anyone who's not spiritual, anyone who is understands that and what that feels like.
Mm-hmm.
And so, first and foremost, I would say the decision's never really up to you. It's up to your higher being, whatever God you believe in. Pray and figure that out for yourself. Um, but secondly, I'm in a weird middle boat with that, because at some points I recognize that you have to be ready, but also there's the point where you're never going to be fully ready. There's plenty of things I've learned in the past year of marriage. We literally just celebrated
Mm-hmm.
our first year of marriage a week and a half ago. And there was so much I probably should have known going into the marriage. And there's certain things I probably messed up on, but that's where forgiveness comes into play. That's where learning comes into play. And she had things that she had to learn as well. And so if you can learn those two together in a way, it actually strengthens your relationship. So yes, there's like things you always have to figure out on your own. I'm not saying you should just jump in, but also there's going to be things you can learn
Well, what
throughout that
about
entire experience.
uh-huh. What about the difference between wanting and needing, right? Maybe that's where I'm trying to get at is you're right. You'll never be 100%. Same thing with business. You'll never be 100% ready just by
Mm-hmm.
reading books. But there is a difference between wanting and needing something, right? Wanting is okay, like, praying to God, working on yourself, being open and looking, and then needing is like, my life sucks. I need somebody to make me feel better, right? Or I need somebody in order to feel whole. And I think there is a big difference between wanting and needing. What do you think?
There is. There is a big difference. It goes back to that
Mm-hmm.
principle where I'm sure everyone has heard this at one point in their lives. Um, if you're poor and you have no money, what you do with your time and what you do with the little money you have is going to be exactly who you're going to be if you become rich and have a lot of money. So if you're poor and you don't have a lot of money, yet you still donate your time, you donate everything you possibly can to help other people, that's exactly who you're going to be when you become rich. But on the contrary, if you're very stingy with your money and you don't give your time back to other people and you don't serve other people when you're poor, you're going to do the exact same thing when you're older and you're rich. And so that same principle I think applies
Mm-hmm.
to marriage, in the sense that yes, of course, you're never going to go in fully, like we both admitted. There's going to be things you need to learn. There's going to be times where it's tougher. There's going to be times where it's a lot better. But at the same point, if you can just trust, for all the spiritual people out there, if you can just trust God's direction inside of your life and say, you know what, I don't understand the entire picture that's coming forth. I can't see into the future. I don't know what's going to happen, but I could trust that he's going to point me in the right direction. That has everything to do with it. At the same time, if you're sitting there and you're telling yourself, I want to get married or I
Yeah.
want to get into a relationship simply because I need somebody else, that definitely is a time where you need to step back and say, okay, I'm not looking at this for the right reasons. That's a selfish reason. That I want to do this because I need somebody. I need somebody to look upon. I need somebody who will be there for
Mm-hmm.
me. That's a very selfish and inward look. But if you could look on the outer and say, I need this
Yeah.
because I am going to help my partner. I'm going to help them become a better person. They're going to help me become a better person, and work at almost like it's a 50-50 split where you're giving and you're taking, you're giving and you're taking. If you could look at it like that, then maybe you're a little bit more prepared.
Yeah. I guess the best way to kind of summarize what we're talking about is there is a difference. And I think the difference in people's lives is some people are not ready. So they're saying, I don't want to get married just yet. Some people are at the state of neediness. They're saying, I need it, which is also means you're not quite ready yet. And then when you get to that spot, which could be at 21, could be at 26, it could be at 30, whatever that state is, when you're at the I want to because this, and this, it'll make me a better man, it'll make me a better, husband, it'll make me a better person, whatever it may be. When you get to that state of I want, I think that's the calling is what it seems to, what I'm picking up from this conversation, right?
Yeah, last piece of advice for anyone who's, and I guess I'm not the perfect guy to talk about this. I mean, I've been married a year. Talk to somebody who's been married for the past 50 years. They could give you a lot better advice than I can. But somebody who got married young,
Right,
I released a
right.
podcast episode about this myself about 6 months ago. I was an Eagle Scout growing up. I'm a firm believer in their motto of be prepared, right? Everything that I did when I was in the scouting program growing up, it was always focused around the motto of be prepared. Before we go on hikes, we need to make sure we had the appropriate amount of water. Before we went on our backpacking trips, we had to make sure we had all the right gear. We were always constantly checking our partners and other troop mates, and our leaders would come and check our bags to make sure we had everything. We were prepared. And in life, there's a beautiful thing, finding the balance of preparation. There's preparation where it's very good, where you make sure it's going to be the right move, especially we'll go back to the business example. There's preparation where you sit back and you do your validation of your market. Do we have enough customers in this market? Can we sell it to enough people? Are they willing to buy it? There's certain things you have to do before you launch a business to make sure it's actually going to succeed. But there's a caveat to that. If I'm going to be preparing, am I doing it to the point where it's actually helping, or am I preparing so much where it becomes
Mm,
procrastination? So connecting that back to our conversation we're having right now with relationships, are you quote unquote preparing so much in your relationship that you're just dragging on the inevitable? You're not committing to each other just because there's some fear of the unknown. And so you're saying you're preparing, you're saying you're eventually going to get there, but in reality it's just procrastination. Or are you actually sitting back and preparing, making sure you're ready
mm,
for the next journey of life? So I think if you can recognize that inside of your, and that's teach their own, everyone's going to have their own journey with that. But if you can recognize, am I actually preparing in a good way,
right.
or am I preparing with procrastination? That's going to be the difference.
Absolutely. I think that's a very strong point you just made is there is a fine line between are you procrastinating or preparing? And I think what it boils down to is exactly what we've been talking about earlier with limiting beliefs too. It's all about self-awareness. And I think it's such a it's such an important topic that I don't think we're talking about enough, and especially in today's day and age with iPhones and computers and things that distract you 24/7. We're never bored, therefore we're never constantly analyzing our behaviors, our awareness of our subconscious, right? So we do things on autopilot without thinking about it, or we jump into a situation, an opportunity, a marriage, whatever it may be, without thinking it through because we're not as self-aware as we could be, right? And I
Mm.
think, things like meditation, journaling, whatever you're walking, whatever it may be, it's it's what gives you that channel to your subconscious that it's like, okay, actually I'm not preparing, I'm procrastinating, right? And that's only a self-discovery thing that you can make, but you won't be able to if you got 10 minutes to kill, so you're going through TikTok or Instagram and you just never by yourself. Or another strong one is using social interactions, having other people around. It can also be this form of escapism that you kind of trick
Oh,
yourself into
so
not,
true.
right?
So
Even,
true.
for example, like you're married, right? You're married, so you're with, your wife is probably around more than anyone else, but there is times that you probably need to take by yourself in order to reflect on certain things about yourself. Otherwise, that will also not give you that space to grow your self-awareness.
I cannot agree more with that statement. There's so many points inside of my life as I looked back and I recognized I was having people around me just for the satisfaction and comfort of having others around me. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing when you have people rallying inside of your corner. It's
Mm-hmm.
amazing to have friends and family who you want to be around and they want to be around you. But at some points, we need that interaction with ourselves so we can
Mm-hmm.
call it what you want, meditate or think about life and figure out what you need to get done. I recognized from the point when I graduated high school
Yeah.
and I was with my friends and family, literally every day I'd be with somebody. And when I was in high school, then I move on and I eventually get to college and whatnot. And I have a roommate 24/7. I have friends that I go to the library with. I have friends that I go to the gym with. I have friends that I study with. Like I didn't have alone time. And then I pop in and now I'm married. And so I recognize that this past year, what you're exactly saying. And I said, okay, of course I want to spend time with my friends and family. Of course I want to be with my wife. But there still has to be moments in my day where I could sit back and I reflect on what I need to get done. And that goes back to a very spiritual side that I have. And hopefully some people can connect with that. That's my time where I could pray, where I can think about what God needs me to do. That's the time where I could study scripture. It's those moments in life where you almost have to do it by yourself.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Actually, high school, always with friends. If I wasn't with friends, it was doing homework or watching Netflix. I mean, there was never a bored moment, just always preoccupied. And also, I think part of it is you're just not taught, especially at that age, about the importance of self awareness, importance of, just sitting and thinking and being alone. Because we have tech, right? I mean, I think I think it hasn't been taught because it was never an issue. Our grandparents didn't have that issue where they could sit in their room and pull out a supercomputer and then just do whatever they wanted. They could look up anything in the world, right? They could watch polar bears in Antarctica. Like they can do whatever you want. So they didn't have that issue. So that would just wasn't taught over generations, right? So you just like, I think, high school didn't, I was never bored. College, even like you said, you just have dorm mates, you go to the study hall, you go to the library, there's just people everywhere. You're just never bored. And if you are alone, it's just because you're studying, not because you're just sitting there and thinking. So then when the pandemic hit, which was about halfway through my college experience, it was the first time in a long time that it was just me and my thoughts and nothing else to do. There wasn't enough time. There wasn't enough TV I could watch to kill that kind of time because you know how it was when you're quarantined and isolated. It's like, well, I had no choice but to just sit there with myself at times. And I think that was the start, a spark even, I could say, was like, okay, there is importance here of thinking about your life and subconscious. I mean, that was where I made a pivotal change from continuing medicine, which is what I want to do my whole life. And the podcast came out of it. So different things, right? And it all sparked from this sense of self awareness and sitting with yourself. Um, I also wanted to make a quick side point here when you mentioned earlier about the idea of money amplifying your behavior. I think that's so true. And I say that all the time is money doesn't make you who you are. It just kind of shows you who you are to a easier extent. It's like a
Mm-hmm.
magnifying glass almost. It's not an enhancer of any kind. It's just an amplifier, right? So if you're a good person, money will make you a better person. If you donate, you'll donate more. If you help, you'll help more, right? But if you are stingy, it'll just make you even more stingy because you have more to be stingy about, just like that, right? So I thought that was a cool point that I wanted to touch back on.
Yeah. Whatever it does inside of your life right now is what it's going to do in the future. Be it you're a broke college student who's listening to this show or wherever stage of life you're at. I guess that's a challenge I could leave with everybody out there listening today is at whatever point of life you're in, I can't resonate with you perfectly. Nobody else can resonate with you perfectly except yourself. So take some time, go find a little moment with nobody else around and go have a moment with yourself and figure out in your life where you could start giving back, whether that be more time, more money, more effort, whatever it is, in a relationship, in your spiritual life, in your business life, in your physical life. Figure out where you need to start giving back more. And I promise you, it's going to make the dividends inside of your life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, I know you just gave your closing thoughts, but I normally ask the guests at the end of the show, because the show is called Learn or Be Learned, what is one life lesson that either you learn from someone or you want the audience to learn from your life that you want to just kind of close out with as well? A
Yeah,
life
definitely.
lesson.
So, as my final cliche here, I'm a big fan of the cliches because I think we need to hear them over and over again because when we forget about them, that's when we don't apply them. That's when we don't use them in practice. There's a reason they're said a lot. It's because it's good advice. So, my cliche, my final piece of advice for anyone who's still listening
Right. It's
out
like
there
when they
today.
say common sense is not common.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Common sense isn't common. You need to hear these things over and over. The
Yeah.
repetition is what makes it work. So, my final cliche out there for you guys today is just get started. I don't care if that's in your spiritual journey. I don't care if that's in your physical journey, in your journey of pursuing the girl or guy you're interested in, if that's in your business journey, which we talked a lot about today. Just get started. There's always going to be something holding your back. There's always going to be something or someone telling you no. But if you just go for it, even if you fail, I promise you it's going to help you learn in the future. Failure is going to be the best teacher you can have, and you need to start embracing it. So start, fail, start, fail until something actually sticks.
I think that's beautifully said. I think we lived in a society that kind of pushed this narrative that failure is bad. But I think failure is one of the best things that could happen to you, because what is success without failure? You can't have success without failure. And in all honesty, success only comes from failure, right? You fail, learn, pivot, try again. And that's the key. What you're saying here is, jump, fail, try, but learn. Otherwise, you'll make the same failure. And that's truly what I think failure is not learning from the mistakes. But I couldn't have said it better myself, Brandon. Thank you so much for being on this show and taking the time out of your day to share some knowledge about your life and what you've been up to. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Heck yeah, I appreciate you and everything that you're doing. You've made a beautiful platform out here.